everyone. Welcome back to Fans of Fandom. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Wesselmann, psychologist, professor, and full-time nerd. On this show, I have a deep dive conversations with cool people about cool things we're fans of. If you're joining us, chances are you're a fan too. Welcome aboard. Today, I'm joined once more by my good friend and colleague, Mr. Victor Dandridge Jr. Victor, please tell the audience a little about yourself.
Hello, I am Victor Dandridge, lovingly called the hardest working man in comics. I'm a phenomenological narratologist, as well as self-publishing comic creator from Columbus, Ohio, producing through my imprint Vantage and House Productions, as well as the teaching imprint You Create Comics. And super excited to be back here to talk even more about the death of Superman, because it is what brought me into comics, and so it has a very special place in my heart.
Excellent, excellent. Always good to geek out with you.
Absolutely.
So this is a part of the ongoing series where we discuss our love for Dark Ages of DC, a period in the early to mid 1990s when DC was shaking up their key characters, trying to get people interested in these titles again, while trying to compete with the glut of new grim and gritty anti-heroes, especially from competing comics imprints beyond the established rivalry with Marvel. So Image, Dark Horse, Valiant were all growing around this time. And we've, as Victor noted, we've been focusing on the first key event, the death of Superman. We've done a deep dive into the marketing and the lead-up issues to the final event, and the actual death issue we'll discuss today. Before diving in, though, I do want to spend a couple nerdy minutes talking about some of the stuff that we've learned since beginning this series. So, in terms of research, those of you who know me know that I can't stop. I won't stop. I don't even know how to stop.
That's real.
And so we talked about the marketing lead up, and there was some interesting marketing focus specifically on the death issue. Some was from direct from DC, and other events were more homegrown. So let's talk a little bit about what I've learned about the lead up, since we started recording.
Sure.
There was a bit of coyness in the trade press and DC's direct currents catalog that they sent to retailers leading up to the first Doomsday issues released in October '92. So these things would come out usually about 1 to 2, maybe 3 months before things were going to hit the stand to tell comic shop folks what they should be ordering,
right,
how they should be promoting, etc. And so when they're discussing the first 4 or 5 issues of Doomsday, the ones that were released in October, cover dated November, it was always coy in these descriptions like, oh, this is a major force in Superman's life leading up to a pivotal event. But they never said death. It wasn't until the November issues were being advertised, those final few, that they were like, okay, no more mincing words. Superman is going to die. And this was made clear in the Mike Carlin interview in Advance Comics, once again, November '92 cover date. I was able to track this down. I first learned about it in the back matter from the 30th anniversary hardcover of Superman 75. Thank you, Victor. And so me being the nerd that I am said, I got to track this down. Not only did I track this down, but thanks to the nerdy folks in our university library, we were able to track down the Newsday.
Oh, wow.
Of the Newsday. Sort of, that was the major mainstream newspaper story that cited this. And so awesome. I will post an image of that in editing. But yeah, we were able to track down that as well.
That's awesome.
Also, shortly later, you had Previews, which was from Diamond Comics Distributors. They put out this, and this was advertised as their first enhanced cover, because this was the early 90s.
Shiny lettering.
Dark Ages, all about the cover gimmicks, right? So yeah, shiny up here, the cape here and the stick, these are raised a bit. So... And then, as I mentioned, DC's direct currents, we have this one as well. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. What's interesting to me is when you start to look at the culture of comic book promotion, right? So the reason why I got involved in this was because I wasn't exactly one of the typical fans that they normally marketed to. all of that material was for those people that regularly went to a comic shop and were told that an event was coming, but wouldn't necessarily want any spoilers to what that event was ultimately going to entail. Whereas when it was promoted to me, to the direct public, it was like outwardly told Superman was going to die. That's why I wanted to read it. And I think there's something very interesting that ultimately showcases the effect of when you're talking to a non-integrated audience and how you have to tell them a little bit more than you would naturally share with your core audience, because your core audience are the folks that would probably have picked it up anyway, just because they're actively reading. But with that announcement to the non-core, that's how you got those people that I think were really responsible for the speculator boom, because they came in with intention of getting the death of Superman without necessarily following through with the rest of the series and figuring out what that was going to be. So I think there's something really powerful about what the marketing plan was from DC Comics at the time and how they spoke to two separate audiences about this one event.
Yeah, there was I love that phrase you used, integrated audience. Because as we talked about in previous episodes, there was so much of an attempt to try and hit folks in different ways.
Right.
You get your standard readers, but you get your new folks too. And I've tracked down multiple interviews, even ones that were published in trade press the year or so after the death, when they were moving into the return. And consistently, those early interviews, the interviews that were published in the back matter, all of the audio commentaries I've seen on the DVDs, the Superman creative team have all been consistent and coherent in their story. Right. That it was, they expected it to be an event, but they had no clue.
They had no clue. And you can't, right? Because as talented as creators as they are, right? And I mean, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much all of them are still alive and creating to this day. But you couldn't know what this phenomenon was going to be. They can aim to create an event, and mind you, DC Comics was kind of the first to ever create a specific within narrative event. Having the Crisis on Infinite Earths, like, that was a huge thing. Some people can argue that Marvel, their Secret Wars was a response to that, but it was DC that first put together, like, hey, let's do something that's going to generate a lot of conversation, bring all our characters together in some major happening that's going to change the status quo moving forward. And so getting the opportunity to do this with Superman, 7-8 years after Crisis, this was a new sort of format. We're talking, a new decade, a new thought process of what comics could be, and really kind of saying, okay, we're going to do something monumental, but they can't know how monumental it truly was going to be. They could just shoot their best shot, and I think they nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, this idea of cross-book events, Crisis obviously being a big one. Shortly, I think a year or so before this, they had Superman's Panic in the Sky, which was a cross DC event,
but smaller, much smaller.
Yeah. And they tried to do more of that with this series, which we'll get more into when we talk about the aftermath. But aside from that, Marvel seemed to be the one that was regularly doing those cross-book events, and it wasn't always necessarily the entire universe, but like every year they were having a cross X-Men book event, and they were, especially when you got into what was it, Inferno, crossing our universes here. But that one was okay, everybody X-Men related, and anyone in New York, because it was centered in New York. So like most of the New York heroes had like on Inferno cross
little sort of showcase or appearance.
But and for regular fans, right? I mean, they could only, and this was something that I've seen written about, not just about those events, but even this event and some of the others are subsequent Superman related stories afterwards. There were a lot of fans who were like, damn it, I can't afford to buy all these books.
I don't have that kind of capital. Even at $1 a piece, I can't do it.
Well, young Eric and young Victor, we were probably riding our bikes to the comic stores, the local racks, and
absolutely,
we had to have all the change that we didn't drop on the way.
Please believe it. Yes, indeed. Listen, there was nothing worse than riding with a bunch of coins in your pocket because you were just sure as soon as you hit that one curb, everything was gone. Like that's the worst feeling ever. But no, I think you're absolutely right. When you look at the framework of setting up the Death of Superman, the amount of coordination as not just a creative story, but a marketing platform, huge. Like it really was something that was monumental because of all the work that went into it. Again, having different levels of acknowledgement of what this story was actually going to be is something that's kind of amazing, because I mean, let's look at it from this water cooler-esque sort of mindset. So they said to the greater world at large, the non-comic book readers, that Superman was going to die. So let's say you are, a little bit older, maybe you're working in the workforce, or you're a college age student, maybe high school student, and you've heard this, and you know that there's this nerdy kid or colleague or somebody that, regularly goes to the comic shop, and while you don't understand that culture, you're kind of curious, like, so did you hear that they're going to kill Superman? What do you mean they're going to kill Superman? No, they're not. And now you have like this inner back and forth, this banter of comics culture at the time, how usually if someone did die, give it a little while, they'll be back. So there was a dismissal, almost like if you start to look at early stages of grief, like there was an aspect of denial that had to happen to typical comic readers, because they're like, no, this is just a marketing thing, it's not real. And they're like, I heard about it on the news. And that you go, well, wait, like they said it on the news? Like, no, that's not what that is, not at all. And then you have those guys that are the comic book readers going into their shops, grabbing all of this content that is promoting this upcoming event. Oh, see, it doesn't say he's going to die. It just says like there's this new character. So I'm like, it's such a brilliant marketing bit of irony that those people that weren't, again, intrinsically involved in comics, actually probably walked into this story knowing more of what the outcome was going to be than those people that they had regularly been like hyping their product to for decades.
Well, and so yeah, I do remember seeing in this in the letters to the editor, like in Wizard and things, around this time, after it was announced, the first couple issues afterwards, there was a lot of back and forth, both among fans and among people in the industry who were not involved in the books, being like, do you really think he's going to stay dead forever? But at the same time, there was this tension because, I mean, at this stage, Jason Todd was still dead.
Jason Todd was still dead.
He didn't come back for another 10 years or something, right?
More than that, even. Like, I mean, this was like Jason Todd was dead for a long time. And in relative comic book terms, there are only at that point, there were only two other characters that had long form deaths that had never returned, and that would be Bucky and Uncle Ben. Like, and then we actually brought back Bucky later on, right? So Uncle Ben is currently the only one that had a significant death that has not come back in actual continuity, which good. But yeah, I think
I'll raise you one more too.
Oh yeah,
the original Captain Marvel in Marvel.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Marvel had not come back either. Still hasn't actually. So you're absolutely right. But yeah, like that was kind of the thing where, again, look at the characters that we named. DC didn't do that. Like DC didn't kill characters. You had golden age iterations of characters that would retire, but they never died. Like, well, nope, I take that back, because as a basis for how powerful Crisis was, Barry Allen died, and he hadn't come back yet. Right. But that was the huge multiversal shaping event of Crisis, not something in your regular monthly features. That didn't happen in regular monthly features in DC at the time. That wasn't what they did.
Right, because you also had, speaking of Crisis again, you had the original Supergirl, Kara.
Right.
Or Kara. One of the things that Carlin and some of the other creative team kind of riffed on was, they're like, well, Superman, there will be a Superman, right? Even when they were we're jumping ahead a lot here, but even when they go into the rain, they're like, but will it be the same one? It doesn't have to be, right?
That's
Because
right.
we had a different Flash,
Mhm.
we had a different Supergirl.
Right.
In Marvel, we had different Captain Marvels.
Mhm.
So yeah, so there is this
A sense of legacy.
potential ambiguity that, sure,
Absolutely.
these hardcore comic fans are like, oh no, they're never going to kill Superman. But is it going to be the same Superman?
That's the
That's a
question.
harder one to push.
Of course, because I mean, look at their other characters that were positioned for legacy treatment. Batman has been, positioned for legacy treatment forever since the creation of Dick Grayson. And so, it's always the assumption that Dick will be the natural usurper of the Batman mantle when Bruce puts it down. That has been this long form understanding. But even under the basis of Robin, how many different Robins have there been? That is a legacy position.
Mm-hmm.
The Silver Age started by giving legacy treatment to both Flash and Green Lantern. So this was something that, was commonplace for DC. But again, those early iterations of characters didn't have to die. And those two that we are calling for, Barry Allen Flash and Kara Zor-El Supergirl, died in Crisis, which was an event. Like that was something that was not your monthly title. That was something way bigger in the readership scheme of things. To actually have a monthly book series that a character was supposed to die in wasn't normal, was not a. So you can see like how so many different long time comic book readers were dismissive because they're like, that's not how that works. Like that doesn't happen here. Like, no. What do you think this is? Crisis? Get out of here. And I think
we only had one Crisis at this point. We didn't have every other.
Yes. Like that's one of the things I think is so interesting is they've never gone back and called it the Doomsday Crisis. They've never said that. Crisis has been reserved for something that has been a DC overarching event. And not to say that this wasn't, because I mean, you literally had the Justice League involved, you had Superman involved, but this has been still a very focused Superman-oriented story, which meant the stakes were presumed as limited. There was no way they wouldn't dare. How dare they?
So it's one of the things that's interesting to me about how this sort of eventizing, not full event, but still recognizing that it is one. When you look at those trade press like Advanced Comics previews or even Direct Currents, in all of their descriptions across their different books, they would usually say if something was part one of a part two,
right?
But even in the same issues, they gave special treatment to Death of Superman because they bolded that it was part of it, whereas the other ones were just said part one of two.
Gotcha.
But they bolded it and they said this follows from the previous issue, and they named what that one was. And here's the next one. So the other ones were not given that. Even the jumping ahead a bit to a completely different series,
right? Even
the overlaps with Nightfall
really
might get that same treatment, and we'll put a long-term pin in that one. But there was something special about this, even as their events were overlapping, that they recognized people are going to want to buy across this. And that actually occurred, something I've yet to justify to myself being able to buy. I found a couple copies online, but it's a little too rich for my
what's the range? What's the range for those?
Yeah, dated October 1992, DC sent an official press kit to comic retailers. So I'm not going to show, I found a few pictures online, but I don't own it, so I'm going to try to avoid showing pictures that I don't have. But you can find these archived on people selling it on Amazon and eBay. This kit came in a big black envelope. So this is form of a manila envelope, but just black instead. It was sealed with a sticker of Lois holding a dead Superman, an early version of the art that would become the trade paperback. This envelope included several ideas for exploiting the event with local media. So they were like, hey, retailers, this is going to be big. Here are just some ideas that you can use. They had some posters in there, both for the death and for the funeral. And these posters had a listing of all of the different tie-in books, right? Because there was going to be some overlap with some back issues,
Right.
when people came in for 75. There were even some reprintings of the first couple Doomsday issues. But it's like, hey, you came in just for 75. We don't have the trade yet, but here's how you get the whole story.
Yeah.
Like end cap things. There were these promotional rest in peace buttons in there, so I did manage to get one of those. Let's see here. Yeah, other sort of props. There were these other product tie-ins that they also were advertising. So there were a first run of bloody S-Shield t-shirts like this.
Hey.
This is not the original,
but still.
Yeah. It was interesting because these were called weeping S-Shields, not bloody.
Not bloody, but weeping. Oh, they're tears. They're tears because bloody is too violent.
Right, exactly. There was also, and this is what I found out from the back matter of the anniversary edition, there was a collector's watch that they put out.
Wow.
And a limited edition Metropolis Rubble.
Like, you got rocks?
You got rocks.
That's genius.
Yeah, indeed. Like
that is genius.
Like the collector.
Oh my god!
Goes, holy crap! I want a rock. And
okay, no, because as a creator, you want things that are so inspiring to fans that they want to be a part of this, and that is such a hilariously, stupidly smart thing to include. Like, this was actual rock from the battle. Can you imagine you being 10 years old and someone gives you a small container of rocks and said, these are from the battle where Superman died? That is like the greatest thing in the world for you to hold on to, because you're like, this is sacred. Like, Superman bled here. Like, this is you. It taps into that sense of innocent belief. That is what comics is all about. Like, that is such a huge offering. And how many people wouldn't even think of it that way? But that is so smart. So smart.
Well, and you got a two-pronged thing here too, because you got like the 10-year-old, right, who's like, oh my god, really? Possibly, hypothetically, you're still in that stage of you haven't become too cynical yet,
right?
You're still thinking concretely, but
that rocks. One good turn deserves another. There you go.
There we go. But you all would also get your adult fans, your hardcore collectors, who would still want that stuff too.
Yeah.
Because even though they're like, no, this is just gravel from the driveway, but DC sent it to me and it's limited.
That's right. That's right.
Numbered.
Oh, that's so smart. Hold on, let me write that down for my own use. Sell rocks.
Well, when you have one of those drop down, drag out battles with Apex Prime, I will totally.
It's coming. So no, but I think again, like, it's tapping into or bringing imagination beyond the page. And from a marketing standpoint, when you're talking about getting people interested in, a reading phenomenon, this is up there with Harry Potter. Okay, think about, go back into the Wayback Machine and think of when people were in line to see Deathly Hallows Part 2. How many of them showed up in full-on robes with their own wands? Like, it's that same mentality of wanting to be a part of something so bad that you're taking it off the page and having it in real life. I have rocks from when Superman died. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, and those the standing in line, right? I mean, you might those things are organic.
Yes.
And here is DC providing a framework as well as some suggestions, but this also offers the space for individual retailers to get really, really creative. I happen to have some examples. So yeah, there were many local shops that decided to stage their own media events to gain publicity, sell copies of the first printing,
Of course.
and probably also contributed to desire for the second through the fourth printings of the book. They were printing as far out as April, about the time that they were ramping up to bring Superman back in some way, shape.
He's still dead though. He's still dead. Let's still sell some more things.
So as I do my deep dives into old Wizard magazines, I find fan letters, and here is one that I found that I particularly enjoyed because it also involved another aspect of my interest about that time, certainly related to Superman. So some of you all who are Victor and I's age may remember a little band called the Spin Doctors, right? Their radio singles were Two Princes and Little Can't Be Wrong. But they also, the first track on that album was a little song called Jimmy Olsen's Blues, and the album itself was Pocket Full of Kryptonite.
Yes. Yes.
And so I found this particular letter. It was published in the April 93 version of Wizard, but it was a series of letters because of the lag. These were all letters that were written, and this one was mailed the release of the day that Superman 75 was released.
Wow.
And so this person was talking about how cool the story was, but then also sort of kind of shaking their fist at the heavens because this was clearly a longtime comic book fan who was, like you mentioned earlier, Victor, the nerdy kid that a bunch of non-fans knew and would ask that person about this. And here they turned on their local radio station and discovered the local station was giving away sets of the 6-part Death of Superman series and a copy of Spin Doctor's Pocket Full of Kryptonite. So now, of course, every time I see this picture, I hear those beginning notes of Jimmy Olsen's Blues. No,
that's brilliant
performance, folks.
I love it. I love it. I brought this up off camera, but I have to tell everyone that's watching, it's so phenomenal that you brought this one up in particular, because this was around the time where I was being introduced to non-Black, non-pop music. And one of my uncles, not one of the ones that was, super gung-ho about, the art side of me getting into comics, but the reading side, my Uncle Danny, he actually was one that was, a living, breathing paradox. I mean, this is the man that smoked like a pack a day and, on the weekends would get, a couple 40 ounces, go to the library, grab some science fiction novels and drink and read for the weekend. Like that was what he did. But he was one of the first that said, you need to explore music from a non-Black cultural standpoint. You need to expand some other things. And he put me on to Spin Doctors, Pocket Full of Kryptonite, because of my interest in comics. And he's like, I don't even know if this is actually comic book related, but Kryptonite is on here. Try this and see what it is. And that's kind of like the level of dissemination that this actually had. Was you had things that weren't directly connected, even on a peripheral level connected. I mean, because it's called Pocket Full of Kryptonite, you got the Jimmy Olsen song, and they're like, let's put this with Superman's death. Like, and this makes a viable marketing package that we can give away to fans of our radio station with no real telling. Like, because I mean, think about it. There's no telling specifically that someone that would want this album would want those comics, but they want it, right? And now it's even something even more important, because as they're finding out about this storyline, they've won something that potentially could be very valuable. And they also are getting the CD that they might be caring about. Like, there's so much about this that is so spot on point, and genius. Wow. Like, I don't even know if we market like this anymore. I think we should.
Yeah, I mean, these types of tie-ins are certainly not unique to comics. In one of my other scholarly hats, I love film, and I look at film history, and the term exploitation, right, gets kind of a bad rap, but it's also an industry term where if you look at some of the trade press from movie theaters from the 40s to even through the 60s and 70s, they actually had sections that were called exploitation tactics. So just like what DC sent to shops, same idea. Hey, you're running a horror movie? Maybe you should consider going to your local funeral homes
Wow.
and seeing if they want to bring their hearse and park, if a hearse that they're not
Oh
using,
my God,
and
that's
park it in
genius.
front of the theater, and it advertises them. It
And it
adds
gives you
a
just something a
morbid
little.
cue. I mean, yeah, the Ramones were featured in a film called Rock and Roll High School, right? And one of the fun things about that DVD is it's, of course, DVD-ROM.
Of course.
They happened to have an old press book for that film,
Wow.
and it recommended local radio stations having contests where high school kids would call in and say what they would love to do if they could have their high school for a day. And no rules. And they would win free copies of either the Rock and Roll High School soundtrack or just a Ramones CD, right?
Come on.
So
That is so smart.
Yeah, it's just multi-tiered. I mean, it would have to look different now because of social media and everything, but there has to be ways that it's not being fully tapped in that same way.
If I'm being honest, as a comic creator, I can tell you we're not talking to comic shops like this anymore, and we should be. We're actively trying to get them to buy our products and sell it to their customers, but we're not thinking of, hey, this might be a great way for you to do that. Like, we just presume, hey, you're a comic shop, I've made a comic, 1 + 1 is 2, peanut butter and jelly. Like, there you go. But it's not the way. And this is at a time where I think it's so interesting. Culture was changing. You had video game, like in-home console culture exploding at this time. You've got animation is becoming a little bit more reticent, where you're not having to wait till Saturday to see great animation. You can get it every day. Toys are blowing up. Movies are becoming more sophisticated and technologically wow. Like this is Jurassic Park. This is Terminator 2. So things that we still watch 30 years later with a sense of awe, because that's how good they were back then. And they're having to figure out how they're going to treat this medium that wasn't, considered art, wasn't considered literature. How do we get people to pay attention to it? By pairing it to things that we know people like. And it's so smart that we're dumb for not doing it anymore. Like, I will give myself a little bit of a modicum of credit. I'm the guy that, based on our current culture that comic book movies are so popular, I'm spending free comic book day at a local movie theater because Guardians of the Galaxy is coming out that weekend. So I'm basically setting up a private Comic-Con in a space that I know people are wanting to go to. So that is my version of the tie-in. But, we generally don't think like that. And it's such a missed opportunity because this worked. Without question, it worked.
Yeah. It generates excitement. A couple of things I want to add in that I thought of as we were talking, other types of things that they could have tied in but didn't, perhaps. Well, I know that crash test dummies, right, were also big around this time with their single. That single on the other side had a track from the Crash Test Dummies previous album called Superman Song.
Wow.
So Victor, you might want to look at that afterwards.
Might have to,
out there, put that on there. So it's not as catchy as Jimmy Olsen's Blues,
but I mean,
it's sort of a more meditative piece.
It's something that could have worked. I mean, I think that's genius. That's genius.
It's better than tugging on Superman's cape. So
and spitting in the wind. You're absolutely right. You just don't do that. These are things you don't do.
Now, before I go on, I really always have to say not only how much do I love going down memory lane with you here. I'm glad that we met when we did.
Yes.
But I really wish that we would have grown up closer together.
Man, it would have been so, because again, when you're talking about a cultural phenomenon like comics, and then an event like this within comics, those people that have true like minds or a simpatico about it are so small, and it's almost a necessity that we didn't grow up together so that we both could get to this place naturally. Because again, I do have friends that we got into comics based on this event. We went to the same schools, we're in the same classes, but we don't necessarily have the same affinity for what this event was. And sometimes I think that's also where you start to separate your interest points. I mean, you're 10, the early tween stages when you really try to find out who you are and what you're going to be about, moving forward. So, man, you're right. But I almost feel like it had to happen this way so that we could have this conversation. Otherwise, we would have had it a long time ago, and we wouldn't be able to recreate that feeling that we're having right now talking about it, because we would have talked about it 30 years ago. So
That's great. So yeah, we've got let's think about multiverse. There's a multiverse.
There is a multiverse where it happens.
Eric and Victor have had this conversation a million times
over the last 30 years. Like, we've been talking about it. No, I'm telling you, spin doctors, they actually are talking about the death of Superman. They knew. That's why Jimmy Olsen was blue. Think about it.
Yeah.
A pocket full of kryptonite, it would kill Superman like a doomsday. I'm sorry. When did it drop? It dropped when? Yeah. Ridiculous.
Well, this next slide I've got here is another great example of homegrown comic shop events. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I know, once again, it was TV that you learned about Death of Superman as well. So here was, and I've read plenty of letters about this, and I think I've managed to track down this video, and I think I know which comic shop it is, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to go on record. But it was one out in Lake Forest, California, where, certainly people saw a lot of interviews on Entertainment Tonight, etc., where Mike Carlin, Jurgens, all the other creative folks all got, interviews. But this particular one that I stumbled across on YouTube was a comic shop where they actually rented a casket, they staged a funeral, they hired local actors to cosplay Lewis Lane. I love that. And I think there were probably some others there, but these are the ones that were highlighted to
oh my goodness,
pretend to be these characters mourning. Like, so you'd stand while you were standing in line to buy your copy, you walk into an event with a casket. They may have even had a hearse outside, I don't know, but like, how immersive. This is just amazing ballyhoo, right? I mean, this is like the 50s in Hollywood.
Yes, this is genius. Okay. From a retail standpoint, because again, maybe that's something that DC recommended, but for a retailer to pull this off, huge, like absolutely, like one of the biggest opportunities, because what it does, and this is the thing that I think most people need to understand when it comes to the economic ecosystem, right? So you have a publisher, and a publisher is ultimately going to not sell their material to the public, but to a retailer. And it is the retailer's job to figure out how they're going to sell this product, where other retailers are getting the exact same thing to a demographic of consumer, right? And so ideally speaking, the publisher thinks about the consumer to give tools to the retailer in order to reach them, which it sounds like that press kit was a great, phenomenon of that. And we don't see that often, but at the same time, they empower retailers to go, now you figure out the thing that's going to ultimately make you stand out amongst your peers so that people come to you versus anything else. Like, that would have been such an amazing thing, because again, like you said, it's a highly immersive piece here. I mean, can you imagine being there and they're recording this, right? So you get to see this Lewis Lane, in her hysterics, crying over this fallen Superman. How do you not make that like an experiential shopping trip, right? Because I think that is also a thing that we are seeing the folly of a lot of comic shops not building. They're not making their shop experientially a necessity for where we shop at. We're not making it, a space where if you don't come here, you're missing out. You and I recently, we were at local comic shop. Can we say the name of the local comic shop? Okay, we were at Graham Cracker recently in Normal, and we were talking with one of the store clerks there, and the interaction that we had with him was the reason why I think we collectively bought as much stuff as we did, because he was throwing stuff out there and we're like, oh, well, let me check that out. Oh, this looks cool. Like, when you create an experiential phenomenon for your customers, it becomes the focal point of their shopping experience with you. You are the reason why they're shopping there. It's not the product, because they can go to any comic shop and get that product. This is the reason to come to your shop, your store. And so something like this is so smart that it becomes something where you're just like, how come we don't do this more often? If there's any place that is, outside of a theater or movie theater specifically, that is all about theatrics, it should be a comic shop. Like it should be a place where like you're literally walking in to falling rubble and like the Hulk's hand is coming through a wall and you're like, oh my goodness. Like this is that place to play that up. And to see that there was an actual funeral in a comic shop, like it now makes me want to go back and think of all the different characters who have died in modern history of comics, and how come we didn't see this? We didn't see this when Captain America died. We didn't see, like all these different folks where how powerful would this have been in terms of boosting sales and just, bringing people into the door? This would have been huge, absolutely huge. And I can't even, I'm curious as to what level of, like, how long did it take them to produce this? What was this kind of improv? Was it on the fly? Was there a script? What level did they go through to do this? And what's even crazier is when you do stuff like this, comic shops, I hope you're listening, when you do stuff like this, you potentially could be creating content that you can sell that other people won't have. If you put together a script, if you put together like a whole shot list of stuff and you collected that as a book and you made that something separate, that's yours, you publish it, it's like you now have something that no other shop can have. And in this day and age of eBay and Amazon, you could put that as a book, send it off to CGC slabbing. So now it's a higher value thing than anything ever, but it's personalized, one of one, maybe one of 10. And now you've got this huge exclusive item that not only commemorates a great comic book event, but it commemorates your store as well. Y'all need to be thinking about this right here. And again, it's one of those things where it never fails. The answer for our future lies in some of the gimmicks of the past. The things that we threw away or we forgot and we're like, that's stupid. No, this is genius. This is genius on every level. I mean, you're talking cosplay, that wasn't even a phenomenon back then. Like, I can't even imagine how much it costs to get that Batman outfit. Back then, like, now this is, of course, is an Amazon purchase, easy peasy. But back then, I can't, no. And the thoughtfulness that they had the blacked out eyes, right? Like, this is stuff that even in the movies, that's how they did it, but that's not what they showed us, right? Because, I mean, this is obviously Michael Keaton era Batman. And in Batman Returns, we have that scene where he famously rips off his cowl, but his eyes aren't blackened, right?
Yes, you're right.
They're clean. So even though that is literally how they had to do it, that's not what they wanted us to see. So the fact that they even put that amount of effort into this, high level, amazing, absolutely amazing.
Like, just thinking, like, if I were at this local store, I would have totally loved to have like a like you get those when you go to funerals and visitations, you get those sort of little memorial things. You could print some of those. And of course, some of those you might be able to sell if you find someone who's crazy like me but has more disposable income than I do, who would be like, I gotta have it.
I got to.
People, but I like one of the points that you make about trying to get people to come to your shop, right? Because I could buy stuff wherever. I could get stuff online. I could get it digitally. Now I'm analog. I like to get the hard copy as much as I can. But these types of events really do get you connected to that store emotionally, if nothing else. Like, I'm getting an experience here that I won't get anywhere else. That the store cares about not just the money of their regulars, but so I remember being at Graham Cracker one time. I think this was around the winter holidays. People coming in to buy stuff, and I was looking through some things, or I was getting ready to wait in line. So some dude came in from was like, my kid likes comics, I need a comic, which good. But the store manager's like, well, hold on, I'll help you in a second to find what you need. Let me help this club member first. He was referring to me. I was like, dude, I'm a club member.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I am, like, I mean,
that's right. I'm a regular. He
coming
knows my
in.
name. Like
Yep.
that creates prestige, because if guys like, well, club member, my kid loves comic, how does he become a club member?
Yeah.
This is how you further it. Like it's
Mhm.
such a smart thing, and we don't do it enough. We really don't.
No, when I taught my this is my last aside, but I taught when I teach my comics courses, I do have an assignment where they have to go to our local brick and mortar store, and they have to buy something new from the racks, right? And the local shop is, you know, they'll usually order some like Image Firsts, or, you know, some other
Simple
sort of
$1
reprinted number
joints.
ones. But one of the reasons when I have them go in there is not just to buy something new, but they have to have a conversation with whoever's running the store at that day.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are other people in there, I ask them to basically be a fly on the wall and listen to other fans' conversations to see how those social dynamics go. Because there have been several books I bought where I happen to be, you know, digging through the 75-cent bin and talking to the person next to me, digging through that bin. And through that conversation, like, oh, you like this book? Hey, have you heard of that? No, I have not.
Let me tell you why you should check this out. Without spoiling it, you should check. This is how our community was built.
Yep.
It is literally this. I'm doing research on social media marketing, and it's a referral process, right? It's not necessarily that you're an expert or anything else like that. It's you're a potential friend who has experienced this product and you're recommending it to another person. Like that word of mouth is so huge, because when it comes to something that you have to experience in order to truly appreciate, it's the only way that you can know before you do it. Like that's it. Right. That's why movie critics are a thing. That's why book critics are a thing, because their job is to present this idea of a referral. Either I'm referring it to you, or I'm telling you stay away from it because it's not that great.
Right.
That's the idea. But when you're in a space like that and you get that one-on-one conversation, it is some of the greatest bits of interaction with another person, because you're just people. You're just people having a talk. And
you're people who get each other generally, right? You're there because you like the same general things.
Yes.
And so their recommendation is going to mean more to you, more social proof than someone who's not in that.
Absolutely.
So there are many benefits to being in, I'll call them nerd spaces,
Man.
right? Conventions being another. We could, you know, even like record stores, right? I mean, that's a, you know, particularly if it's a niche store, punk rock, indie, what have you. These are nerd spaces, right?
Easily.
Yeah. So.
That's brilliant. I like that.
All right. Well, that'll be a whole nother series in and of itself. Okay, now, the moment that you've all been waiting for. Some of you longer than others.
Worth it, though. Worth it.
Yep. We are now going to actually talk about the death issue proper. So as I mentioned back in our first episode, this was the issue that I came in on. I did not read any of the previous. Well, they call this a 6-part issue. I'm calling it a 7 because I include Justice League America in this.
That's fair.
So now I knew from the moment I picked up that bagged issue was what was going to happen, right? I mean, that's I was going in to get that. So of course you see the bag.
Wow.
Right. Wow. So you've got the bloody Superman symbol.
Yes.
Now, in true Hitchcockian suspense, even though I know what's going to happen before the characters do, I just need to see how it plays out. So I bust that bag open, which I did. And at the time, this was Christmas Eve, and I must have sat there for what felt like an hour. It was probably only like 5 minutes. But like, do I open it? Do I not? My parents were like, we bought you the damn thing. Open it.
You're like,
so I did.
The value.
So of course, you know, you pull out the book. This is the direct market edition, and it's this special tombstone cover. Now, of course, it wasn't signed. I got the sign back at Wizard World in Chicago in 06 or 07.
Nice.
So, but I see this. I'm like, here lies Earth's greatest hero. Holy shit! They're not messing around. Now, before I start to read it, I am also like, there's some stuff in this bag. what is this, man?
What else is in there?
Right?
It's like Cracker Jacks. You're like, wait, is there prizes in here?
Yeah, well, there's totally prizes. This is the nerd Happy Meal, right? We have the special armband,
Yes.
right? We have the faux obituary.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now, that has been a source of inspiration for me for years.
Mhm.
I have wanted to, and this is no joke, anybody that hears this, you heard it here first. As a comic creator, I have wanted to partner with the journalism department of a higher ed organization like Illinois State University and give them comic book events, and then having their students write reports based on the occurrences of that comic book event. Like Galactus has shown up in New York. What would that have been like? How would you have written about that in the paper? Superman dies. How would you have written that in the paper? Because the thing that makes that so incredible is that it is an actual obituary written by Lois.
That's right. Yeah. No,
or not by Lois. I thought it was written by Lois.
R. Lowell Stern.
So it's everybody. Okay, that's cute.
Yeah,
that's
she
cute.
writes the final story in
That's
the
right.
paper, which then
Yes.
shows up on the back of the trade paperback.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's
So
what it is, yes.
yeah.
Yeah. But the idea of writing within continuity from a character of the continuity, I think is such a fabulous sense of reality checking and making this whole thing feel real. It is such a smart thing to do. And I've always wanted to challenge a journalism class to do that. But back burner. Okay, keep going.
Before we go on, I love that idea. I don't know who R. Lowell Stern is, but there is a Roger Stern.
There is a Roger Stern, yes.
Who writes for Superman.
Right.
Don't know what Roger's middle name is.
Or is it a combination of Louise Simonson, who also wrote for this? So Lowell could be Louise. There could be a couple of things in there that combo of people. Yes.
So you may have just given me an assignment.
Oh no. Yeah, you gotta find out who Lowell
These
Stern
people will be like, so hey, and they're gonna be like, dude, who the hell are you? One, two, that was like 30 some years ago.
I don't remember. It was an intern or somebody. You found out it was like Jeff Johns. That was a pen name by Jeff Johns back then.
There you go. Early writing by Jeff Johns.
Exactly.
We had a prototype of the Death of Superman trading card. Now, there were lots of trading cards. I think we talked about this a little bit before at the time. But if any one character had one, which I think Spider-Man did, and then X-Men did.
X-Men had a series, right.
But those series like cut across events and books, right? This was one character, one event.
Yes. This, when it comes to trading cards, and again, I've said it before, I will say it again, the answer to our future lies in the gimmicks of the past. I am using this. Like, this is no joke. I've decided that as part of my way of capturing new readerships, specifically through kids, is the idea of a low-cost, high-yield collectible, like a trading card, where what I'm doing is I'm taking imagery from the book itself and making trading cards of that to talk about, an experience within the story or creating it or a character that's portrayed, because those are the things that give people a sensibility that they know something even before they've actually experienced all of it. Like that's how me coming into comics, early 90s, it has already had some 30 to 60 years of content already. And how do I find out about things that I could never get my hands on? Cards like that. That's how I learned about Golden Age, characters, because I could never find those. I could never afford those books. Right. That's for sure. So my way of learning about them are collectible pieces like that. And the Death of Superman is such a huge piece where they're very story specific, telling you about the Death of Superman story in a quick, fun, collectible way. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I learned about the Dark Phoenix before even reading the stories.
That's what I'm saying.
From the Marvel cards,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That might have been Marvel Series 2, or no, actually, that was the X-Men series, right? Because we
Okay.
had that going. DC had their series at this time too, which we've talked about before. The Golden, Silver,
Modern
Age,
whatever that means. How many different modern age versions could we have of Superman from 92? There'd be a bunch. Okay, there's long hair, there's short hair, electro blue, electro red, like
oh yeah,
new 52, like that's it'd be a bunch. So that's how it is.
You know, with the red speedos, without the red speedos.
All modern.
Yes.
But yeah, like those are a pivotal piece of collector memorabilia that we don't really understand how powerful they were. And honestly, I do think that is part of the reason why we've seen such a drop in comics readership, because we haven't been able to give a full presentation of an experience. And this is why, in my creator perspective, things like manga are winning out, because with manga, not only are you getting a bigger book for your dollars, but it also typically ties into an animated piece that you can watch even more of, or possibly get ahead of with the manga. So you're getting more content for your entrance than what we're getting with traditional American comics. But this was a time period where you could get a toy, a comic, a card series, and it all built on that same story experience for the readers. Genius.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, toys. I mean, we still have some of those, but yeah, there's so much more integration. And I also wonder how much of this, because when we're talking about manga, I mean, you've got people who are fans. I mean, how much you do it with comics too. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm analog. If I can have something physical, I want that.
I want that. Yeah.
Like, you know, people talk about these digital
NFTs, non-fungible tokens.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, okay, fine, but if I have that on a hard drive and that hard drive crashes, I lose it.
I lose
it. You know, which is why my ass with not only over 1,500 CDs, but even more than that in terms of MP3s.
Yes.
I've got like 4 different backups, right? Because I do not like the idea that Bandcamp, right? If they decide to no longer carry that artist, I don't have that.
It's gone. It's gone.
You know, Netflix, it decides it no longer wants Castlevania, and I didn't buy the DVDs for that. I can't watch it.
I don't get it.
I'm owning this. I am owning this if I can.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. Also,
the stamps. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Now these did come with the DC promo pack to stores. So they were allowed to put a few of these up early, right? Yeah. So it was actually, get this right here, that image there that sealed it. So, but yeah, we have the fake stamps, and they made sure to say these are fake stamps.
They're not real. They're not real. Don't send those out.
Of course, I'm thinking, why the hell would I put that in an envelope anyway, right? But
never. But okay, so here's my question: in terms of what it is as a fake stamp, are they perforated for you to tear them out?
They are.
And do they have a sticky back to them? Like, is it something that you could actually put on a letter if you so chose to do so?
So it doesn't look like it, but I mean, I don't know. It may be one of those things that you could lick. I'm not gonna.
Fair game. But
no, like, it's not a peel off.
Okay, so in terms of marketing material, I think that too is something that we aren't thinking about these days. Like, how difficult would it be to make a image where we're perforating, graphics out, and we slap that on a Kickstarter piece? It may not be actual postage, but how would someone respond if they got something like that as part of their packaging? Like, I think they would find that just the coolest thing ever, just as much thought as you put into what their experience is of getting that package. I think it's a huge idea. How come we're not doing that more? I'm writing it down. Make stamps.
You sent me something. When I ordered The Trouble with Love,
yes,
I feel like you had a sticker of Apex Prime in sort of chibi form.
Yes,
if I may.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah.
So
that was definitely in there as part of your thing to open the package. And it is that concept, right? And that was just something I thought of that was cute and fun, not something I had regularly, planned for. However, I did for a time before I had more people complain about it. I was putting things in polybags, and I had people that were like, I don't know if I want to open it. I'm like, well, you should open it. Like, it's got the stuff in it. Yeah, but that's a really cool polybag, and I don't know that I want to open it. So I kind of stopped doing it, but it is the essence of what I learned from the Death of Superman, because it creates this great experience of, I got something special.
Yeah. Oh,
Too fun.
That's hilarious, and I'm going to avoid jumping into that just yet because we'll do a whole
thing. Yeah. We'll
jump yes, exactly. Like, you're like, it's so cool. Do I want to ruin it?
It's so good. Oh God. Yeah.
There was a second armband. I was a little disappointed. I will say that there was only one armband in the most recent anniversary. But I mean, that's I think because in my mind, I'm like, I got two in the first. Right. So the fact that I just got one, I should.
Why are you being cheap? What's going on?
Back in my day, when this was $250 cover price, $295 in Canada.
Come on, we got two bands, But the thing that always bothered me about the armbands, there was not a specific way to connect it.
Oh yes, no,
it was just the armband. So you had to figure out, either you tape it or you tried to pin it. Hopefully you didn't pierce yourself so that you didn't bleed on it. But I never actually wore it because I never could figure out how to do it.
Yeah, not same. Yeah. I thought about that. I'm like, I would want to wear one. I wanted to wear one on this. I'm like,
I would do that
without bleeding,
right? Like that's because I'm, we are of a level where we could potentially call our wives to ask for help, but at the same time, do I want to call my wife and go, "Hey, can you help me put on the Superman armband?" It might not work well. Yeah. Every time she's always like, "I do love you. I do love you. I do love you. There's a reason why I married you. I just have to remember. This
is part of the deal." The final piece,
the poster.
The poster of the funeral, which is of course not a. It's kind of a. I'm trying to remember what I've seen a reference to this type of image before, not this specific one, but the idea of something that is conceptually a true image, but not literally, because Lois is there up front with all of the dignitaries, and as we'll talk about when we get to the actual story, she's not.
She's not.
And so actually I've got it somewhere around here. Hold on, where did I put all this shit? One of the most recent
yes
of the anniversary.
Love
is
it.
A rip on that, right?
Love it. So okay, going back to that poster.
Yes.
And this is again part of the marketing educational side of things that publishers aren't thinking about these days, and they need to bring this back. So you had a ton of characters that don't actually show up in the Death of Superman story arc. When you have all these right? You have all these folks through the use of trading cards, specifically the DC Comics line. I could identify who those characters were, what their powers were, and things like that. Otherwise, you're talking more than a dozen characters that I have no real relevance as to who they are, because I don't read their books. I haven't read their books. I haven't been introduced to them. But you have this poster that has all these characters on it, and then I have something that is kind of like my little factoid sheet that I can go to, and I'm quizzing myself. Oh, that's Gangbuster. Oh, that's Starfire. That's Azrael. Like it's such a experiential phenomenon that again, it wasn't necessarily sold to me that way from a retailer standpoint. It wasn't necessarily created that way from a publisher standpoint, but this was my own interaction and engagement with this product collectively that built upon my fandom from this series. Like it's how, and I quickly gained the understanding that the reason why Spider-Man, Captain America, and Fantastic Four aren't there is because it's a totally different imprint. It's a totally different company. And that sort of separation was kind of the beginnings of what made me a true comic book fan, because I knew the differences based on that experiential bit. It's interesting. There's a lot that goes into it.
And that last bit about the poster, and then we can jump into some images, but just my own experiential. I remember a year or so later watching the show Roseanne, right? And the character of David Johnny Galecki, right? So Darlene's boyfriend, for a period of time he lives in their basement.
Yes.
And he has that poster on his wall.
He does. Oh my God. Talk about a precursor to the Big Bang Theory. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's amazing.
Okay, all right. So now, a young Eric has opened this up and poured all these things out and seen all of this. And is like, okay, now I get into the story. I opened this book, right, with the tombstone cover first. And now I hadn't even seen a picture of Doomsday yet, because this is my first issue. And now I see this. Right? I mean,
that's right.
It's a cool action shot. Right, you notice the blood and the chaos, and I hadn't seen a lot of blood in comics at that point in time. Certainly not on Superman.
Certainly
not. I see this dude who's the one who's going to be powerful enough to take him out. Okay, but I'd seen a splash page before, right? But then I turn the page and I see another, and another, and another. And that's new, right? So, but before we turn the page, animation wise. And anything you want to say about your reactions to this particular opening?
So I didn't understand storytelling wise at the time what I was experiencing. And it's the phenomenon of it with the series of splash pages is the showcase of one, arguably how quick the action is occurring and how powerful the action is, because splash pages are somewhat reserved for big moments in a comic, right? So if it's a single page splash or a double page splash, the idea is that it's such a big phenomenal occurrence that you have to give like the full range of the page in order to get it. It harkens back to Sunday comics, where the most popular comics of the day were given a full page as opposed to a little strip. So this is kind of that homage to how important this moment actually is in storytelling. But again, as a kid, I'm just looking at it as it's bombastic, like it's big. To understand exactly what all is happening, I'm just like, oh my goodness, like they're brawling. Like that's the thing that you get out of this. And you're having to figure out exactly what Doomsday is doing to Superman. Because for the longest time I was like, is he biting him? No, worse than that. It's just the bones of his chin are grinding into Superman's bicep. His mouth is open, but it's not even like he's biting him. And here is Superman struggling with all of his might to fight this guy who is literally getting ready to punch the heck out of him because he's got a free hand that's gonna, like, you take this in and you're like, this is bad for Superman.
Yeah.
You immediately get the impression, because as torn up as the one shred on Doomsday's left hand is, he's not bleeding. He doesn't seem like hurt or stopped at all. Superman's cape is disheveled and destroyed. His suit is torn. He's bleeding from multiple places, and he looks angrier than we've ever seen him. This is not mild-mannered Clark Kent under any circumstance. This is a guy that is in for the fight of his life, and that's page 1.
Yep.
Insane.
Yeah, and I mean, just like, so, like, yeah, he's got, as you mentioned, he's got the one arm block holding that. He's got around his head, which, as I was a wrestler in high school and in junior high, so I kind of felt that. I also didn't quite understand, because this was my first introduction. I'm like, what are these laser beams?
Right. Who is shooting? What is this?
Yeah, and I mean, of course, we talk about that in a previous episode, and the next page, which I don't have scanned here, when they pull out, because if we think of this as a camera angle, I mean, this is right there in the mix.
Yes.
And they pull out, and you see these people flying and shooting down at them.
Yes.
And, as we discussed previously, nobody likes that. I mean, he's getting hit. Superman's getting hit there with friendly fire.
Yeah.
And I think the Cabus guys who are flying with those things are also like, dude, we're gonna hit Superman.
We're gonna hit Superman. They're like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to like, and again, storytelling wise, this is secret sauce storytelling, because what they're telling you is Superman, one, we think Superman can take it. That's number one. But number two, we have to help him or else it won't matter, right? Like if we don't stop that thing, it doesn't matter that we're hitting Superman. We're all gone. We're done for. So one way or the other, we have to stop him. We have to. And if that means Superman's got to get hit, he knew what it was. He hears us talking about it. Like, I don't even know. Like, that's just
right.
it. Like, absolutely insane. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy.
And at this point in time, right, this battle has been raging for, what's it say up there at the top? The better part of a day or something like that.
Yeah.
It started in the Heartland
in Ohio.
Yeah, and it progressed.
Yeah.
With massive property damage and loss of life, and especially as the issues went on, even more brutal gore. So we've, at the beginning we saw, the Justice League get their asses handed to them, but none of them died. They made, Blue Beetle's in a coma.
Man.
And there were some people who were probably trapped in wreckages, but it was just an issue or two before this. Might have even been the issue right before this, where Doomsday lands and just flat out breaks some dudes' necks.
Yeah. Like, it's killing construction workers. Like, they were just at work, okay? Yeah. And he lands like, oh, yep, you're dead. And you're like, wait a minute, hold on. This, and again, we were primed for that when in the first appearance of Doomsday, multiple times we see him killing innocent animals. Yes. We're primed for it. But at the same time, because of the absence of such levels of brutality, we forget until he arrives in Metropolis and just, I'm killing people. You're there? Oh, yeah, you're dead. Oh, you too? Oh, you're dead. Right. Like, insane. But again, this is hitting a scale where I think while we've had this fight and it's been a tough fight this far, what they've definitely done is ramped up the logical prospect that Doomsday could kill Superman. Because through this whole thing, it's kind of been a tit for tat. But at some point, you have to start showing that Doomsday is edging him out. And that's what's ultimately going to make it so that you're like, he might die. Like, this might be real. This is that place where I think those readers that have been longtime, comic book fans, longtime Superman fans, they get to this point, they go, well, maybe he is gonna die. Like, wait, what? He's gonna die? Like, no. And the phenomenon is born, like, truly real.
Well, and we've given a lot of backstory here, not just in previous episodes, but just in this recap. Let's talk about the phenomenology, the storytelling device of recapping on the first page, right? Every comic is someone's first comic. Yes. And in this case, for me, this was my foray into the story. I didn't have all that background, right? So let's look at that. The battle has devastated the better part of America, leaving a path of destruction for almost as long. Earth's mightiest heroes have already fallen under Doomsday's murderous blitzkrieg, right? So what do we got there? We've got the character named. Yeah. We've got the fact that he, beat up the Justice League. That he's a murderer, right? That blitzkrieg, that's a strong word. I mean, that's very. And then at the bottom, only one hope, one man remains. And then you got Superman's first line. Right.
I love how very Midwestern. It stops here, mister. Like, yay. You've been battling, you watched him kill people, and you still have the decency to call him mister. That is so sweet. So very sweet. But I mean, again, like, this is the power of this moment. They have told you that basically anybody else in DC that could have been a stopgap has fallen. Like, they're done. Now, I do want to take a note that we will talk about that in a later piece of what that meant at this point in time versus what that has meant in this story presentation in other media over the years, because that has changed, which is very interesting. But at this point, He's already beaten the Justice League, who is considered the preeminent premier team of DC. Like, it's the Justice League, right? Like, that is the precursor before the Fantastic Four, the precursor before the Avengers. They are the super team, of the time, of the age. Huge. So the idea that he's beaten them, and now the person that's left, the only one, is Superman. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Love that.
So I can't show y'all every page legally or time-wise.
Right.
So make sure y'all go out and get it if you haven't. But I've pulled out here the images that stuck with me as a kid and still stick with me now. This next one is he takes a break from the battle. He has this what ends up being the final moment with Lois, right? He tells her that he loves her. They kiss, and then he leaps off because Doomsday's gotten back out again, right? So now, not only is this just a badass action shot, it's low angle. You got those action lines that are right out of anime manga. You've got the Superman in your face with that fist coming at you with an angriness I'd never seen
ever,
and still have yet to see, I think, in subsequent comics. He's bruised, he's bloody. You get Lois in back, right? Who, I mean, so this is his main, besides his parents, this is his main supporting cast. Lois's comment here was and still is really heartbreaking to me, because at this point, I think she recognizes, just as he does, the inevitability that we've been confronted with the entire time, more or less. We know where this is going. And this, I think they, at least the two of them, Jimmy, I don't know, but I think Lois and Superman here know this is it. And like, I experience her dialogue as, like, I mean, she could be shouting it. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's got the emphasis, it's got the italicized font and the bold under please, but maybe it's just because of the positioning of her in the background. But I sort of hear it as this almost like resignation, like this pleading, but it's lost in the battle.
I firmly can appreciate every bit of what you're talking about. I do have a different take on their perspectives. So for me, this was the moment where Superman determined he was going to kill him.
Oh, okay.
That's and the part about that, I mean, and in digging into it, when you've got like the heavy, thick, destructive border to this panel, and Superman is breaking out of it, like, killing has been something that Superman had done in comics before, and it wasn't about that he wouldn't kill, but he wouldn't be so flippant about it, where your problem, kill you. Oh, your problem, throw you in space. Like, you had to be something so extreme where he's like, I can't see any other way to stop you than to kill you. And I'll lament about that. Like, I will feel very bad about that, because for all my power and all the things that I could do, I couldn't figure out how to stop you without killing you. And I'm going to feel bad about that. This is the first time that he had determined, I'm going to kill this guy, and I don't care that I'm going to kill him, because killing him is such a necessity. There is nothing to feel bad about. I've tried to stop him. I've tried to, put him down and be an obstacle, and it's not working. And not only is it not working, he is putting everything that I have ever loved in danger right now. If I don't stop him now, he's going to kill Lois. He's going to destroy Metropolis. What's to stop him from going to Smallville? Nothing. And for the reference sake, the first time that Superman did kill was an iteration of General Zod, who it was Zod, Ursa, like it was a trio of Kryptonians who were in another universe that promised that they would find him and kill everyone that he loved. And he had such a difficulty fighting them when they first, got together, that he went back with Kryptonite to expose them in order to kill them. Because he's like, I can't fight three of you. Like, I'm only winning right now because I have these powers and I know what to do with them in a way that you're not accustomed to. But if you figure this out, I can't fight three of you. I can't. There's not enough power in me. And I know everyone else on Earth could not fight three Kryptonians, so I'm going to have to do this horrible thing. And, he exiles himself in space. And there's this whole storyline that follows through because he feels so bad about making that choice. I don't feel like he would feel bad about this one. This is him determining Doomsday is going to die. Doomsday gets his. Right. He's going down. So I feel like his is a determination that I'm about to kill, right? For her, I think she is more worried that he is going to die. She is more concerned that, and all the things that she has seen him go through in this fight, there is Doomsday has broken something in him where she is now worried that whatever comes out of this will not be her Clark, will not be her Superman. Like, he will be damaged beyond repair, whether that's emotionally, socially, physically. She just wants him to come back. Don't do this. Let's leave. She might be like, let's just go to the fortress. I don't even care.
Right.
Don't go, because whatever you do, when you come back, you will not be the same.
No, it's all of this, like my memory of this is so clear and yet so fuzzy. I get it. Because when we were talking about this a bit ago, I put this moment further in the story. But as you were talking, it reminded me of some things, and I'm flipping back through my trade now.
Gotcha.
Later on, a few pages later, when they do have another exchange. And he says, Superman's now referring to Doomsday. So this is a few pages later. He wants death and destruction. To stop him, I have to become every bit as ferocious, as unrelenting as he is. So that fits, I think, your interpretation of what might be going on in his mind this moment. Yeah. And Lois is like, but you can't.
You can't do that. You can't do
kill
that.
You, and you can't. But then I don't think they have any more exchanges after that. But he can. He has, right? But in her mind, like, this idea of broken. Right, like, is she afraid that he's going to have to cross a line? You're right, that he is no longer going to be the same psychologically. Hero, yeah, right, yeah. So even if he does survive, what sort of trauma
will that do? Right,
remain. I hadn't noticed the frame earlier of the panel, and as you mentioned it, I was flipping through here. Some of these pages are full bleed, but most of them are splash pages with, the sort of, the gutters are pristine, except for this one. Yeah, right. All the ones before that, I think, all the ones before this are retained. Well, with the exception, I suppose, of the one where it actually says Doomsday, and they show the title, right? But all the other ones are pretty standard. Here's the hard black line, the border. This one, you're right. It's not only a hard black; it's a wavy, heavy, intense black line that he's breaking out of. And then in the next one,
he's barely
breaking the borders again, coming into it,
right?
And then it goes back to the regular. Here's the pristine gutter.
Yes, it's because it's like he has left what we knew of what Superman was supposed to be, and now what we're about to get is something very different from Superman. Look at, if you start to really get into what he does story-wise after this, Superman is almost reckless in how he's fighting Doomsday. So he barrels into him, literally just flies into him. But when he does, as you see on the following pages, they go through the struts of a building into a vehicle. Like, if there's people in that building, it could collapse now. And it's not like he's got the time or wherewithal to jump back in and save everybody. He's trying to fight Doomsday. He is literally fighting him in a way that is absolutely reckless, without abandon. As much as people complain about, Man of Steel and the fight that he has with Zod, that's kind of the place that he goes to here. But it's a sign of how ferociously he's trying to fight. He's not fighting. You know, it's not a square up, duke up, I'm gonna punch you. It's I'm trying to take you apart because you are that big of a threat that any aspect of me fighting you like a person is done.
Right.
I've got to take you apart like a machine.
Yeah, and everything becomes we're jumping ahead again. But there's in the Death and Return of Superman, so the more recent animated adaptation, they hired a couple martial artists to sort of choreograph the fighting, and then one of them is highlighted in the bonuses. And the way that martial artist describes the style is that it's in some ways kind of like Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, that you have to be flexible to your opponent, to your environment. In this particular martial art, the person says that everything in the environment becomes a potential weapon.
Yes.
And so we can see examples of that here. I mean, I'm driving you through the building. You know, maybe somewhere in his mind he's like, this is going to add extra. I don't know. I mean, it's so tough to know, having never been in that position and never will be in that position.
Right.
Still,
you don't know. If Doomsday shows up, you might feel inclined to be like, oh, I just gotta fight you, Doomsday. That's how it's gotta go.
Yeah, no, I love your interpretation there. Let's move to the next image that I got, which honestly, you know, there's no action here, like in terms of compared to the others, but the emotional gravitas here, you know, Jimmy and Lois are standing back. You know, Lois will often, as we'll talk about, struggle with the fact that she was going between doing her job as a reporter and caring about the person that she loves. And Jimmy's taking the pictures. He'll go through a similar struggle. But here they are. Superman just got shoved into the ground head first. He's buried. There's his cape. And Lois here is like, Superman's going to die if we don't do something. I'm going to go in there and do what I can. Like, she would, it happens in the, sorry, coughing a bit. It happens in the animated series. She throws a rock at Doomsday.
She does.
Like, I think she would come up and just like punch him here. I mean, after
get away from my man. Like,
I mean, her bravery here, just enough said. Like,
yeah, it's so true. What's interesting is my wife has this thing that she doesn't feel like Superman is particularly heroic because in so many circumstances where he dives in, he knows that he would be okay. And by juxtaposition and comparison, this moment for Lois is high level heroism because this thing has just manhandled Superman, right? And she's still willing to risk her own self. And even in a context that's different from what Jimmy takes it as. Like, Jimmy's like, oh, she's just being the world's greatest reporter. And she's like, no, I want to help Superman. And what I wonder is, was there conversation in the writing process of this moment in particular of, does she reveal Clark to Jimmy here? Like, because what would that have done in terms of story? If she's like, you don't understand, that's Clark. And would Jimmy now be like, Mr. Kent is Superman? Like, what does that do? Like, there's so many parts and pieces where this could have gone. And creatively, like she's specifically saying, Superman is in trouble and I intend to help him. So there is a worrisome sort of emergency reaction, but a thoughtfulness not to call him Clark here, as opposed to a few moments ago when they were embraced and she says, Clark, and he kisses her like, I get it, but you gotta let me do what I'm about to do. You know, I can't worry about you right now. I gotta give Doomsday his. But in this moment, she is still cognitive enough to not call him Clark. And I wonder if that was a conversation that had to be had, because if she called him Clark, that's a whole nother storyline that now has to be explored. Jimmy now knows that Clark Kent is Superman, and Superman has just died, and so is Clark Kent. What does that do to Jimmy? What is that? Like, that's a whole nother storyline. And I wonder if that was something that was brought up and was vetoed because of that concept, because that would be a whole nother thing of how would Jimmy respond to that, you know?
Right.
This is so crazy because, again, the little hints of stuff. So in the panel before where Superman is smashed face first, disrespectfully, by the way, because Doomsday has grabbed him by both feet and just plunged him vertically into the ground. But this is the setup for the penultimate image of this whole franchise, of this series, which is the cape. In that moment, the cape comes off, and we see in this piece, the cape is here on the ground. And I love the little subtlety of being, if you read into it like I do, it says one way down, because that's the way, there's only one way that this ends. That's it.
Wow.
You know, that's the, I don't know if that was intentional, but I have to think that it was, because why else did they put it there?
Well, so yes, exactly. Putting the one-way sign there is intentional.
Right.
It wasn't a street sign. It wasn't a stop sign.
Right.
You know, it was, but what they meant with it, we don't know. But yeah, but we do know that, that they had to choose to draw that there.
That's it. Yeah, that was, you know, on purpose. The question is, what was the purpose? Are they saying Superman is on his one way down? You know, I don't know.
Right.
Absolutely brilliant.
The cape being down there also reminds me of the animated series, or the animated film, the second one, where it doesn't happen here, but I kind of wish that it would have, because it was so brutal. I don't know how you would draw it, I guess, but in the animated movie, Doomsday takes the cape and wraps it around Superman's neck, and then proceeds to choke him with it. So it's taking this symbol of Superman, right,
and
which is
killing
something
it with it.
You talked about, and they talk about the story, and just you know, no capes, right?
No capes. End of mode. Okay, she told y'all. Told y'all a long time ago.
In the movie, that's when it comes off.
Right.
To lend to that fluttering cape in the wind. Image.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, let's go to our next one here, where they had just had their final badam crunch. You know, each of us hit each other with all we've got in mutual death. And what strikes me about this image here, right, is the text-wise, what we get is an aftermath description. Right, we got that it's well, not exactly. So the beginning was telling you what came before, and then we've had a lot of dialogue, and now we have what's clearly this final hit. The only word we get diegetically is her whisper no, and their faces, right? And we get this dialogue from the commentator, right, as the day. Or where it's describing this is what this day is going to be known as, right? As the day the proudest, most noble man they ever knew finally fell. So we've now switched to someone telling this story,
right?
Fact, whether that's 5 minutes, 2 days, 40 years. You know, for those who loved him, for one who would call him husband, one who would call him friend. I mean, this very much strikes me as where were you the day that Superman died?
Yes.
Right? Where were you when this horrible disaster happened?
Yes.
These flashbulb memories that we take with us for the rest of our lives that really bring home the concept of mortality, of meaning. I mean, yeah, you've got the shock in their faces. I love this sort of meta. The aftermath, we're seeing what they're seeing through the lens of the camera.
That's genius. I think the thing that always got me was, and they artfully show it, this looks like the first time Superman made him bleed. Like, yes, he breaks a bone earlier and that causes pain, but if you look, there's a trail of something leaving Doomsday's mouth, and that is not the same trail that's leaving Superman's mouth. Like that's a totally separate trail of fluid or whatever.
Mhm.
And so it's like the first, like Superman has hit him so hard that this thing that hasn't bled at all, not only finally bleeds, but breaks internally to the point where his head is backwards. Like
Yes, yeah.
from the actual shot, Doomsday's head is turned around, almost looking at Superman, but his arms, like, so you realize like he's hit him so hard, his head is turned around. Like, that's insane. Like to think that Superman would ever be that brutal to anything is, you're just like, I've seen him fight Darkseid and not pull off something like that. You hit this thing so hard that its head broke, like its neck is done, and it's like it's turning around, like looking at you as it dies. It's turning around looking at you as you fall backwards. Like, I don't even, what? That is such a level of ferocious power. And the page before it, you have him deliver this blow as a two-fisted hammer swing. It's not a punch. And again, that's speaking to the ferocity that Superman has basically been boiled down to. I am now taking every ounce of what I am, all the things that I can do. You know, in my opinion, like he's not standing on ground when he hits him with this. He's flying and then actively using his super strength while flying, like the combination of those things, possibly at a speed even that is so fast that all of these things put together is the biggest impact that we've ever seen. Like, we're actually lucky that the impact of this didn't shatter Jimmy's camera. That's how I see it. You know, it's that hard. Because
it shatters the ground below them.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a heavy hit, and the immediacy of it, I think is so great. Like, this is the moment Doomsday is done. He's done. Superman, though drastically, preemptively, mortally wounded, still has time. But Doomsday is done. He's dead. He has stopped his rampage. He has ended the threat. This is the most brutal Superman has ever been.
So I want to sit with this for a couple seconds, because I don't know how many times I've read this, you know, over the last 30 years. And I never really fully appreciated that point you made about his head. I mean, I've always focused on Superman, and I kind of see Doomsday in the back, and I see their bodies kind of tangled. And I think most of my focus has always been on Lois and Jimmy. But yeah, like, I mean, that just, it doesn't look anatomically possible without having, and going back to the more recent animated feature.
Yeah.
His head does wrap around like that when he hits him. His head does spin. The one thing I don't recall, now I'm gonna have to rewatch it again.
Right. That's how they get
thank you, Victor.
I'm an emissary of WB. I apologize.
But the it because in that one I think he flies and punches him. But Doomsday, I don't think hits Superman in that animated. I think it's just Superman knocking his head around, and then just collapsing from exhaustion. Right. Internal injuries, right. Which then end up killing him. Because I've often thought, looking at some of these last images where they're fighting each other, like, so there's the blow right before this with the hammer swing, and then even before that, there's turning around here, where so the one right before that, you know, where they're each punching each other in the face, and the shock waves are breaking windows around them. And I look at this and I think, how is this even like it doesn't compute to me.
Right.
And I imagine they had to have had those conversations when designing it. this has to be somehow explainable. Once again, having never been in a knockdown, drag out fight, let alone one to the death, let alone
Right.
one with a supervillain. It just the
It's a tricky portrayal. I think one of the big things about it is, as he has attempted to fight him in his bits of exhaustion, there are moments where he tries to actually like fight him. That part where they're exchanging blows, I think that's the last time that Superman tries to physically fight him, and he's like, you're too tired for this.
right.
You have to put him down. Like, and again, the thing that I adore when you're talking about Superman lore and the buildup of things like that, it's not that they're fighting on a red sun planet. It's not that there's kryptonite around.
Mhm.
He's been charging the entire time, but he's hit a level of exhaustion because I'm using so much power to match this thing that it is winding me down. Like, I've never experienced this before. It's one thing if somebody, Lex exposes me to kryptonite gas and I'm like, oh, I'm weaker. I have just fought through my battery. That's what the problem is. I've literally fought through my battery and I don't have anything left. And at that point, he's like, it's now. It's not even like now or never. It's now. I have got to do this thing to put this thing down, or else. This is it. I've got to put him down while I still can, because after this, I don't know that I've got it in me.
No, and the final hit, I mean, right? What, like, they're boom and up, and it's. I just
There's so much to that hit where you go, what did he do? Like, because again, from the perspective of the two-hand hit, Doomsday is facing him, right? So in the instance of Doomsday hitting him and him hitting Doomsday, Superman falls back as logistically as it makes sense.
Right, yeah.
He has hit Doomsday so hard, Doomsday's head is still looking at Superman where it should have been, but his body has turned completely around.
Right.
Like, the idea, like, I have hit him that hard that it is basically shattered his physical, like, form. Like, he is like, this is not that anymore. Presumably there's liquid on the inside of what would be Doomsday, and that's what's spilling out of his mouth. Like, crazy. And this is a character that, for the most part, was stone solid throughout the entirety of their fight. Yeah.
All right. Well, and so, like, in that final hit too, like, again, I think it's because Superman's the protagonist. He's who we're connecting to, right? He's the one who's bleeding in that hit.
Right.
Doomsday didn't hit him nearly as hard as Superman hit him in that moment.
Right.
Probably couldn't even, just logistically, given the way their bodies are oriented.
Right.
So, which I think speaks to your argument that Doomsday's just done at this point, right? Superman's got a little bit left to have those final touching moments.
Right.
So was it really that last hit, or was Superman gonna go out?
I think he was gonna. Because again, looking at the conversation, right, when they're doing the double hit and all the glass is shattering, he's like, exhausted, but I have to keep fighting until I drop, or he does. Superman has already resigned himself that I'm on my last legs. This is not a matter of, this is not a matter of I want. This is what can I do. I have fought him to the very last end. I don't have anything left. And when he winds up where he says, this is it. Looks like we're both betting everything we've got on this one. Like, he can see it. Like, and the thing that I think is so interesting, Doomsday is considered mindless throughout this whole series. But this is a moment where it seems like Superman is recognizing a sense of recognition from Doomsday. Doomsday himself is like, shit, I'm tired. Like, this guy is what is this? Like, I thought I was the thing, and I could just, this thing keeps getting up and it keeps coming after me, and I can't put it down. You know what? Okay, I got to try before he gets me. I got to get him. If that's something, you know, again, instinctual that they were reading from each other with a sense of how devastating this fight had actually become. Again, maybe that's even something that played out when Superman, for the first time, just 2 pages before, hurts Doomsday. Like, all the things that have happened, Doomsday has never once said, ouch, you know, oh, but the moment that Superman breaks a bone, Doomsday responds, like, he recoils, like, what is that? Like, how did you do that? Did it spark intelligence that is now something that is recognizable? Is Doomsday now recognizing his own mortality? It sounds like it. And if that's the case, you know, does that change the heroic nature of what Superman does? Like, is it possible that in that moment, after Superman hurt him, could he have talked him down? Doesn't matter. Where Superman is, he's not going to. And that's the thing that I think goes right back into that spread of Doomsday is getting his. If Doomsday if Doomsday said, wait, I don't think Superman would have stopped. I think he would have hit him anyway, which it sounds terrible, but Superman would have been like, I can't risk this.
Yeah,
look at what
I've got an opening.
What he's done to Metropolis, what he's done to, you know, the Justice. I can't risk it. I got to do it.
Right, because if you're messing with me, then I can, you know, I've missed this opportunity. I think it also, if we follow the simulation there, that him breaking that bone is the first time he actually hurt Doomsday. And that just tells you how powerful that final hit Superman delivered is, because that means Doomsday was not tired
the whole time. The whole time. He was just like, yeah, this is Tuesday, let's go. But once,
a bone broke. Oh my God, you just hit me with a force that would shatter planets, right?
Like that, you know, it would change the orbit of the moon, like immediately, like, holy crap. So when you look at what that punch was, like, I think that's one of those things where it's both, you know, again, this is kind of my, you know, phenomenological narratologist mind thinking. One of the things that I've had a problem with when it comes to super strength in movies is the portrayal of when you have someone that is super strong against someone who is nigh invulnerable. This essence of punching them through things, I don't think that's the way that physically would work. You know, it's not, that's not the sense of it in physics. And I think that this kind of gives both a context to how hard Superman hit Doomsday, but also how physically durable Doomsday is, that the rest of the city didn't fall. Because Superman hit him in a way that broke Doomsday, but Doomsday's body is so dense that it absorbed all of that impact and didn't break everything else. Like, it's when they're glancing off of each other that it starts to impact everywhere around them, because they're not directing it so thoroughly at one another. But the moment that Superman's like, boom, like, this is a sonic wave body shock, and it's all in Doomsday. Like, it's all in him, and that's what breaks him. Like, that is what liquefies any part of it that's spilling out of his mouth and spins his body around from his head, and now this creature is dead. Like, huge hit. So
I'm gonna take this a darker direction.
Let's go.
Now, so I fully recognize the entire point of this story was to get to this point, right? To show Superman's ultimate sacrifice, and to show that although he is willing to kill, it's in a situation where almost every reader who would be opposed to killing meets their own moral tipping point, right? Because again, this is coming out in the Dark Ages, right, when the rise of anti-heroes was very popular, that grim and gritty characters were willing to kill. You know, like Wolverine, they may not like it,
right,
but they'll do it.
But you don't do it.
So, you know, so you would probably have your anti-hero fans who think Superman is, you know, too square.
Big boy, the Boy Scout.
Right.
Gardner
You would have been like,
style.
okay, I see
People
the,
ain't
I
gonna
see
do
the
that.
necessity of killing him in Man of Steel 16 or 18 or whatever the first appearance of Doomsday was.
Right.
It should have been done then. Those of us who don't want to see it have to have been brought to this place with him.
Mm-hmm.
But let's play the anti-hero card then.
Okay.
If Doomsday had not been worn down to this point, if that's not what went on, it was just that he needed to be hit this hard. Superman could have ended this entire thing
A long time ago.
That first, well, not the first appearance, because he doesn't meet Doomsday until part 3.
Right.
Part 2, if you're not counting Justice League.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting moral conundrum. Now, looking at it at this stage, would we have been comfortable, most of us as readers, saying, okay, we know where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know not Superman dying, but we know that Doomsday is going to kill all these people and do all this, and nothing will stop him but killing him. Do we think, the event aside, Superman should have done this panel 2?
Well, I think the context of him being Superman, we see this concept played out in other media, most notably Justice League Unlimited, where in that one, spoilers for this 15-year-old series, you guys should have definitely seen that now, where he faces off against Darkseid in the episode Destroyer, and Superman has fought Darkseid many times in the Superman animated universe, right? So he's fought him, you know, as Superman the animated series. He's fought him in Justice League. He's now fighting him again in Unlimited. And even at the point of leveling this fight, they have been fighting for a while up until this point. Like, they've been trading blows back to back. You know, it's been a fight. And finally, Superman goes, you know what? I have been holding back this entire time, and I'm now not gonna. You know, I live in a world of cardboard, always afraid that I'd hurt somebody, that, you know, if I let loose my true power, that it can destroy something, kill somebody.
Right.
But you can take it, you know, and I've proven that by the way that we've been going back and forth. You can take my best. So I'm going to give you my best. I'm going to give it to you right now. That is what the essence of this story has been. Superman has fought hard to a level that he was comfortable. And that's why, again, I go, at that moment, he decides, I'm going to fight him in a way that I am not comfortable. You know, I'm going to give him more of my fight than I've ever given anybody, because the normal Supermanish way isn't working.
Right.
It's not, this is not going to work. In fact, not only is it not going to work, I'm starting to feel it. Like, I'm not going to make it if I keep Boy Scouting this. I'm not going to make it. Not going to make it at all. And what I think is, and I don't want to say a missed opportunity, because again, having an understanding of how editorials, you know, act, I think that would have been a very interesting talking point. And maybe I'm misremembering, and they did kind of lean into it, but a very interesting talking point for the Eradicator and his mindset and mentality. If Superman got to this point where he was like, nope, I got to kill things, that is why the Eradicator is so quick to be that way. And why Lois would believe it. Like, well, I actually saw him become this. Like, this was like a psychological switch. He chose it. And now this is him. And I mean, again, in the context, I would have loved it if she was like, this is what I didn't want. This is the thing that I was afraid that you were going to do. And now that you're back, you're that thing. And now you're this killer. And this is terrible. And, you know, what relief she would get once that story plays out. But that's, I always felt like this was something that he had to suffer enough to put down his own moral code and go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, I will sacrifice me. Like, you know, if I have to walk away from this and I don't get to be Superman anymore because of what I'm about to do, so be it.
Right. So, I mean, I guess it's, we can think about it as putting down his moral code, or perhaps being pushed into a space that most of us are not in this specific life or death context, right?
Mhm.
But when we think about the psychology of morality and this idea that things are right or wrong, and there are lines that should not be crossed,
Right.
that would be great if we weren't put in situations where these two values had to be put up against one another. So, when we talk about politics, for example,
Mhm.
and voting for the lesser of the evils, right? We have to decide there are things that I consider to be immoral on
Mhm.
both sides. If I'm calling this, choosing the evils or the lesser of the evils, I'm
Right.
acknowledging that there's some sort of moral infraction, moral compromise.
Mhm.
I have to decide when these two moral values meet, and I have to sacrifice one for the other because that's the way the situation has been constructed because of real world politics or because of what the editors do in the story.
Right.
Where am I going to fall down? And we could say then that Superman is willing to take on this sin, if you will, to what he considers to be a sin to kill, to protect life broadly. And he is
Right.
brought to this point where he realizes there is no other way. There is no talking Doomsday down. It's been written as such multiple times throughout the series. When Maxima gets in his head, and then later on when he's like, this is all he is. He is death and destruction. He lives for this, right? So there's not even like, oh, you don't want to die, so maybe we should just walk away and you should not do this. Darkseid can be reasoned with, right? I mean, in sort of D&D terms, he's kind of lawful evil, right? I mean, he knows what he wants, and when he and Superman reach accords, it's usually because they recognize, okay, the situations have changed. We're still on different sides, but I'm no longer going to fight you, Superman, because it's not giving me what I want.
Well, even as, okay, again, forward jump, but the Doomsday sequel, where he ends up on Apocalypse, and they have that moment where you have two enemies that are brought together because of this third force that is a threat to both.
Right.
And again, for those that are watching this, as much as Darkseid has been uplifted in modern context these days, there was a point where, as a sign of how powerful Doomsday was, he beat the crap out of Darkseid as well until Superman showed up and they double teamed him. Like, that is how powerful Doomsday as a character was portrayed. It was this sense of he is unstoppable. Like, a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, the Hulk is unstoppable. No, he's not. No, he's not. Like, you could lullaby the Hulk. You could beat the Hulk up. You can't do that to Doomsday. Like, it's not a thing. And when you look at that part of him, it is so powerful what he does.
Well, we'll talk about this once again some future episode when we get there. But Dan Jurgens did do a story, Day of Doom, which was released as part of this anniversary, and I never read it before. And what that deals with is the aftermath, the victims' perspectives, right? And what I'll have to reread it, but what I don't recall being in there, and what would be an interesting sort of extra chapter, taking this line that we're going here, is what would those victims say to Superman when they're like, you could have stopped this early and all this stuff wouldn't have happened. That's on you.
That's right.
And I gotta wonder, and maybe there are some stories where Superman writers have played with this that I just haven't read yet, but I gotta wonder if he ever has that thought.
I would say no, generally, because that would be something that might be a little too much for Superman. Too dark. But it is a fascinating idea of, I was trying to be the good guy and realizing that if I had taken this to the conclusion that I ultimately took it to sooner, how many people would still be alive? Because I think that's the thing that makes the Batman Joker argument hold, is the fact that he traditionally still has never killed it, right? But the moment that he does it, then he goes, why did you wait so long? Like, what were you
Right.
waiting for? Did you think that you could save him? Did you think that he would just stop? Like,
Uh-huh.
why did you think that? And again, that's why I think in that moment, and again, this could just be my writer's mind or my grown up, presentation, that Superman recognized something in Doomsday at the end that seemed like personality had grown, or some sort of awareness had grown, but it did not stop him. He had already decided, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And again, if that means I don't get to be Superman anymore, if the greater public sees what I do and they go, oh, you're a monster. And he's like, you're right, I'm leaving. And he takes off, and then maybe he comes back as Clark Kent, and only Lois knows the secret, whatever. But that was the moment where he was like, if being Superman means that I can't make sure that this thing stops, then I don't want to be Superman anymore. I don't want it, because I'm now putting being Superman over what Superman is supposed to do. And I refuse to put the title over the job. There's no way. So
Yeah,
I think there's something tremendous about that. Absolutely tremendous.
well, and I'm sure we could do an entire series of episodes where we just sort of unpack, for example, the Trinity, right? Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, their view, which I've done a little bit. So if
Right.
Those of you at home want to look at Wonder Woman psychology, the book, there's a chapter in there that I wrote with a couple colleagues where we talk about some of these issues. Because Batman, for example, right, I think he definitely recognizes that if he killed the Joker, more people would be alive. Right. And I think he does take that into himself. And there is I don't know if it's an official book or if it's one of those, like, not Elseworlds, but stories that are non-canonical. They occasionally do in graphic novels. But I know there is one moment where the Joker does tell Batman, like, I know how many people have I killed again? I know, and I love you for it. Right. Like the Joker knows.
I know you keep track of that.
Yeah, that you can, and I think he sort of talks about that in there, that, like, you could do this, you could stop me, and you're not, and you feel guilty about it. So yeah, I wonder if Superman, if the way he's written, if his psyche could take that particular truth and how he would deal with that. And that take him into the grim and gritty world. And maybe that's why they haven't told that story, because they want to retain the essence.
Well, and also because I think if you were to look at the Trinity, it's Diana that would have decided that, like, way earlier, that I'm going to have to kill him.
Yeah.
She is a warrior. So she would have traded blows a couple of times, like 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, no. This isn't about fighting. I'm going to have to kill this thing. And if you guys have a problem with that, I'm gonna need y'all to leave right now. Like, that would be Diana, because she would have recognized really early that this isn't about a fight. That's not what this is. This isn't about stopping you to stop you from being bad. I have to stop you from being destructive and killing things rampantly without remorse. Like, that's what I'm stopping you from. So if that's the case, I'm gonna draw my sword right now, and we're going to start cutting off pieces. And depending on when you stop is when I stop. Okay. So you might lose an arm, a leg, or two. And if you still don't stop, then you're losing your head. And then we'll just deal with you from that. And if you're mad about it, you come see me when I'm done. Okay. That's how, that's Diana. That's the sense of what Diana is my breakdown for Diana is Diana could kill you, but she won't, because she doesn't have to. Like, that's like, she knows I can beat you without killing you. But if she were to fight Doomsday in this regard, and again, I think the newer animated movie really presents that really well, where she goes, yeah, no, this isn't about fighting. I got to kill this thing. And, and then we see her efforts towards that. That is a true presentation of Diana versus Doomsday. And it is so real. Whereas, Clark would be like, I just hope I don't have to. I just really don't want to. Oh my God. Okay, I guess I have to. And it's after you've done so much where He's like, well, I guess I have to. Diana would have been the one that been like, if you had just done this before, he would have been dead. She would have been the only one who could have that conversation.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think her essence of truth knows Clark's heart that says, but I get it. You didn't want to do that. That's why you waited so long.
Uh-huh.
I recognize I don't want to do it, but I know it's necessary, so I'm going to do it. You are going to do everything you can. You're going to use your Herculean strength, your stamina of Atlas, if you will, just borrow from Shazam, to try to hold off from doing
universe,
this.
it's okay.
Yeah, to hold off from doing this. But the truth is, you should have done this before. Like, that. And you were trying so hard to be the good guy, but sometimes this is being the good guy. And that's not something you're comfortable with. I get it, because what's to stop you from doing this for everybody? I get it. But the answer to that is me. I'm to stop you from doing that to everybody, because if you get that far, then I'm coming after you, and you don't want it with me. So I think there's a beauty to that, but also I have to recognize that at 93, we weren't looking at Diana that way either.
Right. Yeah, because I'm the entire time you're talking, I'm thinking they basically revisit this idea in Sacrifice, the lead up to Infinite Crisis.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We weren't looking at Diana that way.
That's like 10 episodes. No,
sorry.
30 episodes in the future. But yes, folks at home, that's that this is something that, if you're interested in the particular morality of superheroes, you should read that.
Yes.
Okay, all right. We're so close to the end.
We are.
And we can do this so much longer, and we will. So they fall, and we get the back issue, right? And as Jurgens has said in interviews, Jurgens and Breeding, they were like, all right, well, how do we top an entire issue of splash pages? Well, we do a fold out. We do a triple splash. So you get this double page splash of Lois, sort of saying her last words, comforting Clark in his last moments. And then it folds out with the cape. And that last line, the day a Superman died. And that's the end of the main book, of the main arc. Brilliant. So I don't even know where to begin or end.
Well,
Victor, start us out.
Okay. So this is Baz Luhrmann level tragedy. And I mean that by way of the William Shakespeare Romeo and Juliet that Baz Luhrmann did with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes, which I have gone on record saying is the most tragic version of the Romeo and Juliet story. And the reason for that is this. There's spoilers for this 400-year-old story. Again, just
30-year-old film.
30-year-old film, 400-year-old story. So if you haven't caught it, sorry. Spoiler alert. In the original writing and the way that it's usually played as a play, we know that Romeo takes a poison, right? Because he believes that Juliet has died, and he kills himself, right? That's the plan. He goes and he kills himself, drinking a poison, and he dies. Shortly after he dies, Juliet wakes up from her drug-induced coma to find Romeo dead. She takes his dagger and then kills herself with his dagger. In this movie presentation, where it is generally conceived as this happens, then this happens, Baz Luhrmann overlaps them. And whereas Romeo has just drank the poison, Juliet wakes up and touches his cheek. And he looks at her and they look at each other and he realizes that she wasn't dead. So he has now killed himself for no reason and he knows it. That is tragic. That is one of the worst possible things possible, right? The reason why I compare that to this is the inclusion of Ice and Bloodwind. They had arrived it is possible that Superman could have stopped fighting, taken a breather, and they could have jumped in. And he didn't either know that they were there or he took it anyway. And they had to watch him die when they could have helped. That is tragic. And the way that they are positioned, Bloodwind especially, with his telepathic mind, you have to wonder what is happening. Is he scanning Doomsday? Is he scanning Superman? Is he scanning both? And he is already under the impression, he is hearing the last heartbeats happen. He knows that this is Superman dying. These are his last words, all of that. Because Ice is looking prayerful, right? She's like, oh my God, no, please don't. I hope he's going to be okay. And Bloodwind is just sitting there like, The level of storytelling here, huge. Again, we've got this essence where we see Doomsday's body, right? His head is now facing the correct way again, which means, again, Superman hit him so hard that it's flopping back into position because of where his body is. It's not that his head and neck are attached correctly. It is that gravity has now said everything slumps this way. That's where his head is at. What did Superman do? That is ridiculous. But he is alive enough to ask, did I do it? He's not like, and again, when you think about this, people, please understand, Superman at this point has to be a level of concussed that we don't have words for, because this is a person that can hear individual voices across the planet. This thing is laying dead like inches from him, not feet, inches. And he's not sure if he did it or not. He can't even get the words out. Did I stop him? He is dying. Like, that is the realest interpretation of what has happened. And you almost have to think, because this is the part that when I was a kid, I thought it was messed up that she dropped him. But I took it as, once I got older, he was holding himself up. Like, he was using the last of his strength to hold himself up in Lois's arms, because truth be told, he's too heavy. He physically, when he moves around, his physical weight is so heavy and dense that it would hurt people trying to hold him. So he's like literally using the very last of his strength to hold himself up in her arms to ask, did he die? And once she's like, yes, he's dead, he's like, cool, I'm done. And she can't hold him. Like, he's that heavy that he just falls out of her arms. He is too heavy, and she knows it, and all she can do is wail. I can't even hold you without your help. That's how powerful you are. That's how strong and dense you are. That's how heavy you are. And that's how heavy this moment is for all of us. Like, insane. The animation of Jimmy going from looking at a moment and taking a picture. Mm-hmm. Man, that is both epic, a little bit sad, because his first instinct is to capture a moment rather than be in a moment. And these are two people, I mean, Superman is his friend. Lois is somebody that he looks up to, and his first instinct is to capture the photo. And that's one of the things that I love about the Superman Doomsday movie, is they showcase what the effect of doing that was on Jimmy. Mm-hmm. Jimmy feels bad. Jimmy's like, I'm a piece of crap, because my first instinct in this moment was to take a picture. I wasn't thinking as a person. I was a photographer. I was in the moment. And yes, this is a very important moment, but I'm not being human right now. And I feel a certain kind of way about that.
So I'm going to offer, a slight tweak on that.
Yeah,
and that I think he is being human. Like, I can understand why he would himself question his own humanity. right? But I think he's going to a place that allows him to be in that moment, right? Like, I mean, when it's been a while since I've had my head in the psychology of grief literature, but just thinking about my own personal experiences with profound grief, you get in the would get in these spaces, and sometimes, you know, to just get through that moment, you got to flip a switch.
Oh man,
right? And
that's
be like,
powerful.
this is what has to happen right now. It may be something as simple as I've got to turn on the stove and I got to cook food, even though I'm not hungry. But this has got to get done in this moment. Because if I just sit in the emotions, something doesn't get done. And there's time for that, right? And a lot of researchers who do study grief we'll talk about a lot of this in the funeral stories, but it is this sort of, it's this ebb and flow. Sometimes you got to put those feelings in a box so that you pay that bill, or that if you have, you know, kids, you have a spouse that you have to take care of,
right?
In that moment, something has to happen, right? And then when you need that time to sulk and be in that moment, you know, to be in the grief and paralyzed by it, then someone else can take it, right? Like someone else that you're connected with. Just thinking about the times of my own family in my life with those moments where there are times where my wife is in a moment of grief, and I'm like, okay, fine, we're gonna get up and we're gonna go downstairs, you know, and we're gonna have food, and I know you don't want it, but we gotta have it, you know. And so I think, and that's still very cerebral in me thinking about it after the fact, but I think that for Jimmy in this moment, that is what helped him cope. Like, I got to do something and I can't do anything, so boom, it's just autopilot.
Do you give any allowance to another perspective in that same vein? Because I think you might have totally turned me on that one. That was a shield to him.
Yes.
To put the camera up. Now, like I'm not seeing what I'm seeing.
Yep.
And it's not a real moment until I develop this picture.
Yeah, I think that's also part of it, because it's I think about, for example, I was at a funeral when I was 15, and I remember a particular person, without going too much into the details, because
sure.
But I remember a person being in a moment, sitting near them, and them talking to a person next to them, and being, you know, this was the funeral luncheon, and being like, this is a good cookie.
Wow.
It's got nuts in it, right? And that statement, and I remember just sitting in that moment, because I was like, this particular person was closer to the deceased than I was, right? And I was trying to unpack what was going on there. And I think in that moment, we had to eat, you know, and it just happened to be that moment where that's what they needed to get to that, you know, to put that next foot forward.
That's genius.
And it was such a brief, simple moment, but it was so profound. And, you know, I could see someone else outside of it perhaps going, why are you
jerk? Why do you even talk about cookies?
Right. But like, for me, in that, like, once again, I never had a conversation with this person about this moment, right? But for me, I experienced this is what this person needs to deal with the hole in their heart. And it's powerful.
That is powerful. That is so powerful. And I truly mean that. It's a genius thing to be able to contextualize someone else's experience from an empathetical position. You know, because again, like you said, somebody from the outside could hear the actuality of what was said and not be in the empathy space to understand why that was necessary or why that was sacred even. You know, they might look at it as dismissive. And you're like, nope, you're not hearing what they're saying. You hear what they said, but you're not hearing what they're saying. And that is a very different thing. Wow. Man, that's good. That's good. I can definitely see that being the case for Jimmy. Yeah.
But of course, after the fact, and they may not even know that. Right. And I don't even know if this other person that I'm talking about, if they ever made that connection. Right. Because they were thinking about multiple different things. I've just perseverated on this now for 30 some odd years. Right. And with my own truth, I think I think Jimmy would probably, because we don't get his voice a lot later. We get it a little, which we'll talk about. I keep throwing all these little teasers out there, because it is an entire story, right? Yes. This is just the beginning, and actually, maybe I will use this moment to transition. So we'll talk about Jimmy later. Okay. Because when you close the book, this is the back cover. Yeah. So a lot of back covers of comic books are random ads, video games, movies, other comics that are not necessarily related to the story. This entire issue, front to back, literally, is, oh, you thought we were done? No, the world goes on. And for people who are in the throes of profound grief, the world stops. Like for you, for me, right? But in that moment, but the rest of the world does continue on. And that provides a huge sense of tension that psychologists who counsel grief people going through grief have to navigate. That's what these characters will navigate. That's what us as readers will navigate. True.
Oh man. I think that's the other part of it is in the sense where a character dies in comics, and it's supposed to be something that, at least at the very moment, is impactful. This is one that said the death of Superman is a true event, right? Like, it's not just like a story impact that maybe the next writer is going to fix or undo. This is something that they're saying, no, this is long form. This is what we're looking at. And what I think is most interesting is this is at a time before we really hit the apex of the Dark Ages and the anti-hero, where the thought process was, we don't need somebody like Superman. Here's an entire story that talks about, yes, you do. And it's not even 10 years later that we've gotten so cynical in our presentation of not only, this character in particular, but superheroes as a whole. They were like, yeah, no, we don't need that. And here's a whole storyline. It's like, guys, you have forgotten how powerful his presence was. What good intentionality he invoked, even in the darkest of his fellow heroes. There's that one scene, again, we'll get to it with Funeral for a Friend, where Batman intervenes at the funeral, and he's like, because it's Superman's day, I'm not going to deal with you like I want to. But boy, if this was any other day, that would be your ass. I'm gonna tell you that right now. But I'm gonna let it slide because of why we're here. That's powerful.
Yeah. Okay, so it is slightly different. So the image that I'm currently having on screen is out of the trade paperback. Right. But my general point is still true, because this is the back of the original
design. Yes.
Right. So it has the Funeral for a Friend. The reason why I thought, oh, maybe this was something different is if you notice at the bottom of the one on the screen, the trade paperback is like, look for these other special publications.
Yeah, those things weren't out yet.
All hadn't been planned.
Yes.
So the back is still somewhat the same.
But I mean, again, it even goes to show what more they came up with in response to the public's interest. Because a lot of this stuff, okay, so when you're looking at Funeral for a Friend as the list of books that are coming out, these were already on the slate. These were already on the docket.
Right.
That we know were things that had to come out based on a preview schedule of 3 months in advance, right? So when you get to Superman, the Legacy of Superman, the Superman Gallery, all of those things, those were things that were in response to the success of the death of Superman. So you're looking at things that probably weren't even in conversation until the second or third printing of issue 75. That's when they go, yo, we gotta keep feeding this. We gotta keep feeding this. Excuse me. And what I think is genius from an editorial standpoint and a publisher standpoint is they didn't stop to dwell to try to keep feeding on it. They kept moving, but kept throwing in, little content bombs that would get you like just as ravenous along the way. Because I had all of these. I had each and every one of these because it had to do with the death. Even though we've moved into the aftermath of the death and the continuation of the story, there's something else I need to know. Let me go back and get it. Right. That's how big of a phenomenon it was. And it was so very smart the way that they did it. Every once in a while, you throw something else out there and it's another perspective. It's another idea and people want to jump back into it. Again, that Day of Doom story that you were talking about that came out in like 2002, different perspective. Now we want to see it again. We want to relive what we were thinking and maybe be a little bit more mature, a little bit more grown up about it. Like that's kind of what we're looking at. That's how phenomenal of a story this was. You can throw something else into the fire and it burns just as bright because we're interested.